up, Lisa? What's up? What's up? We had a couple technical difficulties, but you know what? It's on and popping. I am ready. You hear me? I'm ready.
Yes. We had to come back again. That conversation last week was so rich with our audience. And so we come back to give it to you again. But we didn't come empty-handed this time, right, Dr. Katina? We got a special guest. So let's get started. Happy Saturday to everybody. We're so excited that you're joining us again. Before we get into it, though, we need you to share this video. We need you to please push that notification button. And also, let people know that we're on, because you think and believe that that we're sharing information that they could benefit from.
Absolutely.
Also, we have to put a little disclaimer out. We're streaming on StreamYard, but we love engaging with our audience. So anytime you want to leave a comment, please give StreamYard permission to reflect that comment. So listen, you have information to offer too. So somebody needs to hear your words of wisdom. So we want to share and make sure that we're giving everyone everything that they need, walking away with being armed with information to make their marriage fruitful and prosperous, and just I'm lost for words. No. Get so excited, I'm getting ahead of myself. Rewind. Just giving you all the knowledge that you need, because really we are here to have conversations about marriage and family and those interactions that happen between us. But I would be remiss if I didn't give my co-host, Dr. Katina, the opportunity to introduce herself once again.
Well, first of all, thank you, Lisa. And hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And I am Dr. Katina Fuller-Scott. I am the Reconnection Strategist and proud founder of Be What Matters. We are a social purpose movement committed to transforming lives and spaces through professional speaking, leadership coaching, training and development, and consulting, strategy consulting. And on a broader scale, we are interested in forwarding everyday change makers, like making sure that people feel empowered to make change and transform spaces wherever they are. And so I'm excited because this series, this connection, this divine connection with Lisa has really been about building stronger marriages, building stronger communities, and Be What Matters is committed to creating and sustaining the best communities to live, learn, and lead. So I'm going to slow down a little because, I get excited when we start talking about moving communities forward. The best way I know to move communities forward is to move leaders forward. So if you're a parent, if you're in a marital relationship, we need to make sure that we're in alignment and together so that our families are moving and our communities are in a positive place. So that's all I have. Oh, and by the way, I am married 19 years. Come on. 19 years to David Scott. I have 4 bonus children, Valentina, Christina, David Jr., and Trinity. And I recently earned my PhD in leadership. So I know a little bit of something about this thing called life and leadership, and I'm excited to share with you all.
Well, listen, you said a whole mouthful, and that's why I am so honored to be with you here with you today. Again, I'm Lisa Lewis Daniels. I'm the founder of Lionheart Society. And listen, the reason why the doctor and I were able to connect is because I recently graduated from Georgetown University and an executive leadership coach. And what Lionheart, listen, go Hoyas. Here at Lionheart Society, we focus on career, marriage, and parenthood. With the women and the men that we coach, because we believe that you can't lead anybody else unless you can lead yourself first. So Dr. Katina and I are fully engaged on both ends of the spectrum, because I believe that it starts with you first. And in order for you to be able to go into a marriage and able to go into community and be an active participant, you first got to start with yourself. So this is why this is a great partnership. So we won't delay. what we want to do before we get into today's conversation, we just want to give you a few nuggets that kind of dropped out from last week's conversation. We talked about personal identity and how does not equate to singleness. You can bring the personal identity into marriage, but you're not single anymore. So you're supposed to use your value that you have in order to enhance the marriage. We also talked about that losing your identity, how that can bring resentment and anxiety. So how that personal identity within marriage has its place. And when you do lose it, you have to participate in your own rescue in order to regain it and understand where you are at any stage of your life, because understanding that you are in a role, not the role, is key to having personal identity and maintaining in your relationship. And last but not least, wherever you are in your journey, own it, communicate it, and give yourself grace to go through it, which I think is an excellent segue into today's conversation.
Yes.
Because we brought a whole husband this time, right? A whole husband. We are bringing to the stage Ittrick Tobias, who has 10 years of experience in marriage counseling. He has a master's degree in social work. He is a poet and an author. Please bring your virtual hands together for Mr. Ittrick Towers as he brings the whole truth and nothing but the truth today to today's episode.
Let me tell you something. If you're ready to hear this episode, put a 1 or okay in the chat. We need to hear that you are ready, because this conversation is going to be fire. If you're ready, put yes, ready, ready, ready. Put it in the chat, share, and we're bringing them on right now.
Yeah!
He's like, why are you all so excited? You know why we're excited, right?
Listen, we had a comment. Sonia says she is loving this energy we bringing. What? She ain't ready.
Thank you all for having me.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for coming. You know how women, when we get together, we solving the world and we don't really know what anyone is talking about because we always right. But I was telling Katina, like, listen, we don't need the men's voices to get drowned out in this conversation. We need a whole husband to make sure that we given the real truth, because the real truth is both perspectives, right?
Right.
Yes, exactly.
So, who's kicking it off?
Okay, so first of all, Tobias, kind of tell us a little bit about your background with marriage counseling, and then we're going to jump right into the 4 stages of marriage, and then get our conversation going. So, give us a little bit about your experience in marriage counseling.
Okay, I've been working with Dr. Deborah Carter for probably about 10 years, who's a trained licensed psychologist with counseling. So shout out to my CMBC church family, as well as the Honorable Dr. Gina M. Stewart. So I've been doing that for about 10 years now and absolutely love it.
Well, we were talking in our planning and about the 4 stages of marriage. And Lisa, one thing that we said was that relationship management is hard, but it's necessary and permits us to effectively navigate it, right? It doesn't mean that a person is necessarily falling out of love. Is that the couple has grown in different ways and haven't successfully managed how to communicate that and evolve in the relationship. And so when we start getting into having conversations about you asked for it, now grow, talk about what are the 4 stages of marriage that we will be dealing with.
So there's 4 of them, but we only going to talk about 2. Because listen, this conversation was so deep, right, that we decided that we could get it all in, because last week we was only supposed to do 45 minutes and we lost track of time. So we want to honor people's time and realize that, you know, some of y'all that are watching are interested in getting married, you're engaged, you in the thick of it. So you got a whole man and a whole couple of babies. So, you know, you want to get in and get the information. So the first and second stages are romance and passion and expansion and promise. The second stage is settling down and realization. So that's what we're going to talk about this week. But come back next week and we're going to talk about rebellion and power struggles, girl.
Ooh, that's hard.
And then we're going to talk about discovery and reconciliation and beginning again, because there is a time where, you know, you just got to begin again. And this information we use, it was given to us by Dr. Paul R. Giblin, who's a PhD. So we want to give credit where credit is due, but we're going to put our little spin on it. Okay? Absolutely. That's what we're about to do today. So I totally agree that relationships are hard. And so you must, or not must, let's not say must. Let's say in order to effectively navigate them, you must communicate. Because remember last week we talked about owning it, communicating it, and giving each other grace in the relationship. So
think about it like, and Tobias, so this is how this planning went on. We were talking and we let Tobias talk every now and then, but no, I'm just playing. Like we were really trying to do it. But we wanted to all give, you know, people kudos for participating in our 3 posts this past week rather. We talked about 1 or 2 wins that you had in your marriage, how long you were married, and we also talked about some advice. And for a lot of you, we had over 86 comments about and most of them dealing with communication, right? How crucial communication is and flows through each of these 4 stages of marriage, and how successful you will be is your ability to know how to communicate and when to communicate. And so I don't want to jump ahead, but I definitely want to give you a shout out. So if you did not get a chance to put in your questions or answers to that, we're going to pop up some questions on the screen and make sure that you comment and we'll get you in there. All right, go ahead, Lisa.
Well, I want to hear what, you know, the counselor has to say about how some tips maybe that he gives couples who are having a hard time. They love each other. You see that they're trying, but they just not kind of making it over the hump. And they passed stage 1. The honeymoon stage is over.
So,
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, you know what? I was saying, I was setting you up. I'm setting you up for this slam dunk here. So in our conversation, you said there is no blueprint. Their marriage roles and vows are grown into. And look, you need to write that down. Somebody put that in the comment. There is no blueprint. Marriage roles and vows are grown into. The 2 shall become one. What? Not that one that over years. So put that in the comments. There is no blueprint. Talk about that. The advice you gave your sister, I believe it was, when she was getting married.
Yes. Hello, Neil, if you're watching. So I do not like weddings. I'll attend them, but something I don't like to attend. Because it's a party. Everybody wants to come to the party, but at some point the party ends. And when the party ends, the reality starts. And the reality starts, then most of the time those people aren't around. And that's when you need them the most, when the reality starts. You need someone to walk with you. You need someone to be around you that is seasoned, that can encourage you along your journey. And what I told her is that make sure she finds some money for liquor and or wine, whatever she prefers.
Or grape juice for all the single, all the same people. Or grape juice. Keep going.
Well, guys turn water into wine, but you know that's a different show.
Go ahead.
And that she would definitely be praying a lot, because there's no way you can sustain or maintain a healthy marriage without prayer, because prayer is going to be your lifeline. You're going to develop a different relationship with God during this time. And so those were the two things that I told her. And I said, don't be discouraged about the timing of when things take place, because one, there, as I stated, there is no blueprint to a marriage. There is no book to say, okay, well, marriage takes place and on page 1, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. I also told her that love is the greatest inconvenience.
Oh,
Wait a minute, you trying to jump ahead now. Don't give him too much too fast.
Oh, okay.
You can drop that and just leave it. No.
Okay, I'll stop.
So you know what we talked about when you were talking about the advice you gave. One of the thoughts that came up when we were talking about that stage 1 of romance, passion, expansion, and that promise, you know, of always being in the honeymoon stage. And we have some comments in there that the honeymoon stage shouldn't end. And thank you so much for that. And that there's no blueprint. Clara said people should only come to your wedding if they're actually invested in your marriage. That's a whole nother.
You mean not the state flamignon that I serve,
girl?
You mean they weren't supposed to come for that?
And then she said, "You dropped the mic, Tobias." But one thing that we said that most of our definitions of love come from media. They're romanticized and they're idealistic. So these concepts, you know, become challenged when marriage actually happens. We're taught so many, I want to say lies about marriage from media and the idea of having this perfect marriage. So we come in with unrealistic expectations. So let's talk about that for a minute, that love is a verb and falling in love is an emotion.
Let's talk about it. I mean, because like, first of all these people who's saying that the honeymoon stage is never over.
Give them grace, Lisa. Give them grace.
Huh? Like, I will say that you can experience it multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm mad at you, I'm not in the honeymoon stage, sir.
But I get it. Like, I get it. And so we're not doubting anyone. These are just our experiences. But talk about that love is a verb and falling in love is an emotion. That's powerful.
Well, I think sometimes that's what I'm saying. The honeymoon stage is an emotion. That's why I like you enough to marry you, because I don't see myself without you. But immediately once you say, I do, all your ideas of marriage and what love is and what commitment is challenged. And in those moments, that's when real love, or the verb, has to kick in. We talked about last week that it's the commitment. That's where the work is. So when we look at Jerry Maguire, like, you complete me, girl, bye. But I do agree to the point that the honeymoon is never over. I believe you can revisit it time and time again. And it's those moments where you say, I love you enough not to see that over there. Right. I want to keep moving forward. I want to give you grace. I want to forgive you for what you did or what you said. And I want to get back to the emotional side and the intimacy that holds marriage together for years and years and years. But the honeymoon, it does go away, in my opinion. It can come back.
Let me tell you, I'm not trying to cut you off, but they having a field day over in the chats, like Milton, and I happen to know him, so I know he goes strong. But he's like, the honeymoon is never over. So we're gonna honor you today, Bishop Belton. Honor you in saying that, yeah, that part. There are moments, right? The moments we understand that the idea of being absolutely falling head over heels in love with a person, it should be happening throughout your marriage, but it's not always every day, because, you know,
sometimes you just gotta come home where your shoes is at.
Okay, so I'm not gonna get on that part. Tobias, anything else you want to put in there before we move on to something else?
And we have to be aware that life happens. So at some point, as I see in the comments, as my auntie is watching, hey auntie, newness becomes old, and that's just the reality. At some point, I'm going to get used to where we are, and you're going to get used to me, and so now life actually starts at that point. What do we do now?
And you're starting to get over into that second stage. But we're going to put that question up before the audience. Is there a such thing as the one? Now, this is where it got juicy. Is there such thing as the one? We need to see your comments on this one. Is there such thing as the one? But you're getting into the conversation around settling down and realization for stage 2. Isn't that right, Lisa?
It is. I mean, so when you have, we'll give people time to answer that question, but we also talked about unrealistic expectation often set us up for failure. And so when we were having this conversation, this is kind of where the personal identities almost intersect, because you come in with one set of core beliefs and one set of values and a set of thought of how a marriage should go, but the other person does too. And so once the honeymoon stage, Mr. 36 years of marriage, can we at least agree it starts to dissipate and things get real? And that's where you understand what it requires to stay married. It's the stage where I don't always need to be right. I want to stay married to this person because I vowed before my friends and God that I wanted to be married to this person. So you start to figure out what makes that person tick, what makes two become one. And so what are people saying? Each one, Sonia says, and each one of us must be willing to get in the ring together when it gets tough. Listen, because it gets tough. And if you don't have your ride or die, listen, there's a whole problem going on. And so you want to make sure that the person you're committed to is the one that's going to be right there. So what else are people saying about the one?
We need somebody to answer the question. Is there a such thing as the one? That's what we're taught. We're taught that there is only one love in your life. Is there such thing as the one? Somebody said you make somebody that one in your life. I think we can have seasons, because to be honest with you, I've been married. This is my second marriage. And when I first started off, in my first marriage, I believed that person was the one. And guess what? They were the one for that season, right? And then now I'm married again. Not to say that you should just keep getting married, people, but married again, and he's the one. Like, I'm not an advertisement for divorce, but it happens. And I think that idea or that conversation or that belief around the one gets people so caught up, because where does that even come from? Where do we learn about the one? That somehow the one is the love of my life and everything is measured by this idealistic view of the one. I'm sorry, I'm on the soapbox, but go ahead.
It comes from fairy tales. That, again, as you all stated on last week, that we have that preconceived notion that someone is going to save us. And throughout life, we look for that person that's going to save us. And as Lisa stated on last week, we have to have a hand in our own rescue.
Listen, my cousin, Dr. Jamisha Wade, I'm going to give her a shout out, because homegirl did a PhD with 5 babies and a whole man. That's the kind of stock I come from. Anyway, she says, what if the first year is horrible? I mean, it's the first year of marriage is horrible. I mean, it can happen. But when it's the commitment, because they still together. It's really, and Mr. Thompson, he agreed. He said when the fantasy's over. That's kind of what the honeymoon stage is. Because if people really knew they spouses crap before they got married, no one would get married.
No one.
No one would get married.
Somebody said yes multiple ones. I agree. Like, I feel like we need to go back to understanding of where we are in the seasons that we are in. And again, we're not saying we are for marriage, but life happens. And you find yourself, if you're not dealing with, as Tobias said, the fairy tales or the experiences that you had growing up that skew your perception of what marriage is or what relationship is or what the one should be. Because we were taught even as young girls, I know in my community, where, list out all the qualities they should have and but the bottom line is, for a lot of us, we don't even bring those qualities to the table. Oh, I
had a list too.
I had a list, but then it teaches that you got to bring those qualities to the table when you have this whole list. Okay, go ahead, Tobias. I'm sorry.
Guys never have a list. I've never talked to a guy that said, I have a list. We don't. We're really simple creatures. I've never talked to a guy that had a list. But again, I've heard women have the list and they check it all. Well, he didn't do this, he didn't do that. And again, as you stated, am I bringing those same qualities to the table?
Jamisha said the problem with feeling like someone is the one also makes people assume that person can and should be your everything, which is also isolating. Jamisha, you're talking about what we talked about last week, that your partner was never meant to be your end all be all, right? Having a clear expectation of what marriage is and understanding that it will change. Going back to Tobias's point, that we don't have a blueprint and the marriage roles and vows are grown into. Our perspectives change.
And I want to also say, the isolation, that's why I think this podcast, listen, if we don't help nobody but the three of us, like this is such a good conversation, because while I was getting ready today, I thought about something you said, Katina, when we were preparing for the first one, because shout out to all the parents who got babies at home in the midst of the Rona and you still trying to work. And I was just like feeling the weight of it last week. And Dr. Katina was like, you are not your role. Let me tell you how that hit me in my spirit. I was like, yes, there's a light at the end of the tunnel with this. And it was another woman who's married and who's had some of my experience to tell me that, like, marriage is also a community. And so to have someone in the trenches with you also helps continue the desire to stay committed. And it also calls you out when you're not doing right.
I agree. So Vanessa said, I believe, and this is really good, Vanessa. I believe God joins us. I believe God should direct our choices. Therefore, when he joins he and she, they become the one. I think that's the if we can rest in that, and whatever that one looks like in your relationship, let it settle there, right? What are your thoughts on that, Tobias?
I agree. I actually asked a question similar to at work, and I thought I was going to need security because it got really bad. And I asked the people, when do the two become one? And they said, wedding night. I was like, okay, that makes sense. Okay. As soon as the minister pronounces us, or the pastor pronounces man and wife, we become one. I said, all those things sound good, but the scripture tells us that the two shall become one. So shall is a process. So there is an evolution that has to take place between you and your spouse. It won't be immediate. So it's going to take some time for you to grow into the role of husband and wife.
I'm a challenge Mr. Derek. He said, I have a list. It's not the quality, but the physical build too. Well, let me tell you, In my 20s, I was a brick house. I
You
done had a
were
whole
brick.
baby. While I'm still cute, the physical changes. So I would challenge you to think about, people, what else it is you got to, as a woman or man, what else are you bringing to the table? Because
Besides physical.
physicality changes, and
And not only that, you think about physicality, and I happen to know him, so I'll give him a little grace on that one. But you be mindful that illnesses happen.
yeah,
All kinds of things can impact the list that we have. I think who was that? Ada said, I believe if you really date with your eyes wide open, consult God concerning that person, and wait on his response, you will ultimately marry the one for you. Right? And that acknowledgement. Guess what? Not only should you acknowledge God, but you also need to acknowledge where you are.
yeah, because my husband was over 6 foot. That ain't what had happened.
Oh my gosh.
And okay, and I mean that was mainly because my father's over 6 foot. They say little girls marry their fathers and little boys marry their mothers, but that's not what was for me. Now, the husband I got, listen, I will cut you to the white meat for him, because he ended up being my one. But that ain't how it started out. My list has evolved too, as far as, because now, while that's important, the physicality, and I don't want to discount physicality because it is important, but the older you become, you want to know that there's food in the refrigerator. The lights are going to be on at the house. So as we look for spouses, we're looking for those quality. I'm sorry?
And security.
Yes.
Absolutely. The whole becoming one, I love that, Geraldine. The whole becoming one does not remove the one essence of the two. Like, you're still one. Oneness does not mean sameness. I believe Jamisha might have said that. Yep. Oneness does not mean sameness. So there's still identity there, but we can come in alignment. So let's get into, when we're talking about, there's a comfort in knowing one another. Like that stage 2 of settling down and realization that we're in this thing. Let's talk about the comfort in knowing one another.
Well, we're taking over the show. We'll give Mr. Tobias a chance. What is the comfort in knowing? Because I actually think he brought that up in our discussion.
The comfort, because let's look at it from this point. If I continue to stay on this road, then I'm going to see some things that I may or may not like. But I do still know this person. However, if I change partners, I have to start the cycle all over again.
Oh, you know what? Hold on. I just put in the comments, I don't want to start over again. Put that in the comments for married people. I don't want to start all over again. You got to catch this. No
emotional security. So Jamisha says also emotional security. So physical security and stability, as well as emotional security. That's deep.
And when you're talking about, Tobias was talking about, say that last part again, Tobias, because I think that we miss that a lot in our relationships.
Well, starting the cycle over again, we already know this person. I know your strengths. I know your weaknesses. And all of us have them, strengths and weaknesses, good, bad, or indifferent. However, I still know you and I still love you. And so love covers all of those things. And so if I start the cycle over again with another partner, then now I have to start the cycle all over again and getting to know those things. And how much time would that take?
Absolutely. Because you think about, we say marriage is work, but it's such a return on investment when you have the skills and the understanding about the work it takes. And when we say marriage is work, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just saying that love is a verb. God put it out there. It bears all things, right? It believes all things. Love covers. And if you're not in that state of exercising love daily, then we can get comfortable and complacent. Talk about that, being complacent.
I want to comment on something you said earlier first. You said
Yeah.
that you would see a return. And sometimes in the marriage, you won't immediately see a return. So what
That
do
part.
those? So, but the part about that, I still have to be committed. I still have to be faithful, and I still have to be consistent until it yields results that I'm actually praying for.
Betty said, I am too old to start over again. We just broke each other. But Betty, listen, I feel you. I am not getting married again because I don't want to care what anyone else thinks. Like, to stay married, I gotta care what he thinks, what his needs are. Did I hurt his feelings? Is it the right time to say this or that? I get it. Like, I'm too old to. I may have a baby face, but I done been in this thing for a minute, and marriage is not for the faint of heart. It is literally the most single best decision that I made. Because if you see me, you see Mr. Daniels, and vice versa. But I get it. I do not want to get married again. No, ma'am.
Because you have 14 years, right?
Woohoo!
I have 26. I'm counting all my years. Look, I'm the first one and the second one. I put in some good on that first one, so I have to count 26 now. Just
And you, wait a minute, how long have you been married? Because you got some skin in the game too.
Absolutely.
Forever.
You said what? You said
It
forever.
seems like forever. Just forever. Yeah, but it's been 10 years.
And shout out to our spouses that allow us, grace to get on here and act a fool. We try to represent you well.
Because you give us good material.
Right. So, in that comfort in knowing one another, we have to have safe spaces for vulnerabilities, right? This is where we start really growing. I remember the reason you asked for it now, grow comes up. That was we had a poet laureate at our church called Harriet Lipscomb. She's passed, but at my wedding, she made this created this poem. You asked for it, now grow. And it's like she dropped the mic at it, like, you asked for it, now grow. But every time my husband and I get to this point, it's this running joke. When we get to those moments of comfortability, and even those moments where we're feeling like, what are we doing here, right? Why we say to each other, you asked for it, now grow. Now grow. Because at the end of the day, when I made that vow and that commitment to you, I made the vow and commitment to evolve with you, to give you grace to grow, you made a commitment to give me grace to grow. And so you asked for it, now grow is just that commitment to each other that we in it for the long haul. Like no do-overs over here. No do-overs. No do-overs.
Because we talked about how marriage is a learned behavior.
It's a learned behavior.
Yes.
Go ahead, Tobias.
Yeah. And growth is uncomfortable. So
say more, please. Say more.
It's impossible to love and and be comfortable at the same time, because love at some point challenges you. And when you say love is a behavior, in many instances, we've been single longer than you've been married. And so you have to grow into a married mindset, which means my behavior has to change. I no longer can think only about me. I have to think about the other person. And if you have children, now you have to bring the children into play. Is that how does this decision impact them?
Absolutely. I think Jennifer is on to something when she said, don't be under the illusion that your partner will change. If it's something that really creates conflict and you can't get past it, you gotta be realistic. Like 19 years ago, when my husband and I got married, I had no idea 19 years later that his ideas would change, his passions would change, mine would evolve. life would happen, as Tobias said. And so you have to give grace for those spaces of growth and vulnerabilities and realize, yes, Jennifer, be realistic now. Yeah.
But I also think, when grace is present, for me, there's a few exceptions, which we won't necessarily, we call them entanglements, which we will talk about probably in the second show as part 2. But grace is kind of the lubricant, let's say, of marriage. It allows you to make poor decisions. My father says there's no such thing as mistakes. He calls them poor decisions because you get a charge out of the decision that you made. So mistakes or poor decisions, if you will, it allows for that. I mean, every time you go out and you're exposed to something, you change. And so that's going to change the nature of your relationship with your spouse, just a little bit. And so when grace is allowed, I believe you become a better couple. When growth is stifled or change is stifled, then I believe that the outgrowth of that conflict is not allowed to resolve itself and people aren't allowed to be authentic. That's when individuals want to start slinging out the word divorce, because people are going to do what they want to do. Just because you married don't mean you stop being selfish.
Well, that's
not being selfish.
That Ada says love challenges you, and that gets into, and I know Tobias is going to take us in when we talk about selfish. You said, Tobias, in planning, we get comfortable and go back to our selfish state. Talk about that.
We're creatures of habit, number one, and by default, we have a selfish nature. So when things aren't going my way, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to find a way, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Even if it's to the detriment of the relationship. But for that, I'm going to do what I want, and I'm going to have some selfish moments along the way.
Yeah. And how detrimental is that to that stage 2 of settling down and the realization rather of being married? How detrimental is that selfish state to that?
Very selfish, because a lot of things can happen during that time, depending on the nature of what took place.
So we have another question. What year did you realize, folks, put in the comments, that work or marriage was work? Doctor, when did you realize it?
Well, let me lean in on this one. Okay, so seriously, I have a different perspective, and because I bring a different lens, right? I bring a different lens of marriage because I've had a second marriage. But this is the first time that I've also been in a blended family situation. So for me, second time around, that first year was a growth spurt for us in understanding how to navigate. And I realized quickly that it's going to be work at a different level. Like, I learned from the divorce some things that I shouldn't do. I learned a lot about myself and how to interact. But now I was tested with a different set of expectations being in a blended family. So I learned quickly in that first year how to adjust to this next level. So year 1, second time around.
And Ida says love challenges you.
Yeah, that's what we say.
So that's the onslaught really of understanding what in your marriage, what work is required. Because what work I have to do is not going to be the same as the two of y'all's. And it might be at a different year. For you, Tobias, what year was it for you?
Probably like year 2, maybe. Year 2. Yeah.
What made you? I'm digging in because we talk. What made you realize in year 2, Tobias, that marriage would work though?
Good job.
Oh boy, that's real funny, Lisa. Real funny.
You're spilling all the tea and keeping his.
Right.
I've been bamboozled. That's what it's been. See what happened.
We all been bamboozled. Let me tell you, my husband's great aunt. She'd be like, "When y'all gonna get married?" People don't be telling you the real, the good on getting married. They're like, they'll tell you. So for me, it was year 4. My honeymoon stage lasted a long while before, I came in or left and went back out. Mine was when the baby happened. No one tells you the kids blow up your marriage temporarily.
I can't with you. I'm coming back to you. Let Tobias answer this question about when he found out that it took work in that marriage.
I was listening to Lisa. She was doing a great job. Oh boy. I got an example. I don't know if guys will understand this, but we'll go with this one. So we have multiple vehicles. So it seems like every weekend I'm at Firestone because she was hitting the potholes and tearing up the rim. And I was saying to myself, as I was sitting on the passenger side, do you drive all the cars like this? She said, every one of them. I said, oh no. I said, golly. Oh. And so, and her response to all of this was, they just don't make cars like they used to.
That's accurate, though.
No, it's not. Don't
meet your wife. I absolutely love her. Already.
I was like, yeah, this is
So how did you resolve it?
Yeah, yes.
Or could you resolve it?
Once she got better with the potholes, so I made sure she had roadside assistance on everything. So just in case I couldn't get there. But she's gotten a lot better with tires and rims and hitting potholes at 80 miles per hour.
Well, it goes back to what Jennifer said about, sometimes the expectation is unrealistic. And when you realize that it doesn't change or won't change, just be realistic, get the AAA, do what you need to do, and stay married.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to say he gave her a bus pass.
He wouldn't, look, had he given her a bus pass, he wouldn't be sitting here.
Accurate.
Latoya said year 3, once the honeymoon subsided, but she was in marriage too. Her first marriage was dysfunctional, and thank you for sharing that, Tanya. And the work was one-sided almost immediately. So understand that Jamisha said year 4 was rough for us, but thank you all for sharing that, because sometimes we are not as transparent, and it's not necessarily to tell all your business, but there's power in transparency that we don't always get it right. Those first early years are essential. Like developing communication during the settling down stage. Betty Owens, the first week was work, had to get used to living.
Yeah.
What? True story. I remember, and nothing was wrong. We didn't have no arguments. I remember just going to the bathroom, sitting on the side of the tub and be like, this thing won't come off. I started shaking my ring finger. Like, it done got real. Like, all the furniture is moved out of my apartment. I done moved into the house. Like, we together now. I was married now. I was like.
But Tobias talked about that, because remember, Tobias, you talked about that marriage is a learned behavior. The two shall become one. Go back to talk about finances, conflict, and guarding your sacred space for intimacy.
The finances, it's depend on how you all want it to be set up. You can have an individual account on the side, depend on how you want to use it, and as well as a joint account. Just depend on the relationship, the nature of the couple. But in all means, it needs to be discussed, as opposed to having a secret account somewhere. And protecting your relationship, I don't think that's highlighted enough, because people will watch you destroy your marriage, and they will not, because again, we're selfish. So as long as you are with me, then hey, I know you probably should be doing something else, or you should be going home, or you shouldn't have this mindset. But because we're selfish, hey, go ahead by all means, because of now I have to find a new buddy, a new friend.
Yeah, that was some of the moments of advice that we got from Facebook, is that understanding, first of all, that sacred space for your intimacy and engagement, making sure that you're not getting advice from people who definitely don't have a successful marriage. Let me lean in on that. Like, why we talking to them? But the other thing is understanding that there are boundaries that you have to set in your relationship, boundaries with other people, whether it be family members, co-workers, your homegirls, your homeboys. My husband, for a long time, he loves Cameo, and he'd be playing Living That Single Life. David Scott. I had a homeboy. We ain't single over here.
Is it something you're trying to tell me?
As soon as he says single, I'll be like, living that married life.
And again, but the having the sacred part of marriage to say, okay, whether it's because you're competing for time, that's what it ultimately comes down to. And so I have to have that time with your significant other. This is our time. Nothing else matters at this time. We put the phones down and it's just us. And so that's something that you have to do. It's a must.
Yeah. Any questions from the audience? Like, can you believe that we are at 2:50? Like, we're coming up on 1 hour of conversation on this, and we don't want to, blend into other people's time, but we're coming back next week to go in those other stages. But anyone have any questions in the chat while we're going into our last point? Any questions, any final comments about these first two stages of romance and then settling down and realization of marriage? Please put it in there and we'll acknowledge you. One thing that we said in wrapping up, we said neglect can begin to set in when we start taking each other unconsciously for granted. Talk about that, you all.
It happens. I mean, I think neglect also intertwines nicely, and I'm using that sarcastically, with selfishness, because the boundaries, we talked about personal identity, we talked about boundaries within the marriage. It's like a constant rebalancing of, this is important to my own kind of mental stability and who I am, but also there, and we didn't highlight it as much, but that the marriage or the couple has an identity together. And so it's a constant balance between your own identity and the marriage identity, but coming to a realization that in order to be successful at both, one may require you to give more time to the other in order to keep the family unit moving forward. Like, what is the best thing that I can do at this moment to make sure that my family and I continue to move forward? And that may sometimes be working on myself, but then that also means giving time to my family. So if it's not conscious, one point that we didn't touch on is being intentional about your actions. And so you're not gonna be able to give 100% all the time to everything. There's not enough time in the day, but being intentional behind your actions to better ensure that neglect and taking the other members of your family, and or if it's just you and your spouse, that you're not taking each other for granted.
Right. So I'm gonna ask a question that came up. Thomas Melton said, what do you think must be learned before you marry? And maybe that could be the question that we end off on and kind of give each other. Think about that while we go to some of the comments. What do you think must be learned before you marry? Let me get to some of the other comments and insights that people had. Latanya said the intimacy, not sure if you covered what if one spouse is affectionate and the other is not, including hugs and kisses and so forth. Tanya, we'll probably be getting into that in the next section next week, so come back for that. But that's a good question because it is important Jennifer McGee said everyone's idea of marriage and commitment is different. Make sure you and your partners are similar. Very important.
That part.
I'm gonna. Derek Thurman said Solomon's come out. This is for the men. I can't. He definitely had the experience for marriage, 1,000 wives and 1,000 husbands. Amen. Amen.
Okay. You can have them if I can have them.
Right. First of all, let's just be realistic. You don't have enough energy for 1,000 wives. Okay. Did you put me on? Catch me back. All right. Thank you. Geraldine said we plan our weddings when we should move more towards planning our marriage. That goes back to that question that Thomas asked. What do you think must be learned before you marry? And then Jamisha, we do a lot of tag teaming because we have 5 children, but we can and have neglected our friendship. We must protect our time at all costs, especially when it's so limited. You all, thank you so much for being involved in this process. Let me go back to Thomas's question. What do you think must be learned before you marry? And let that be our last question before you take us out, Lisa.
I'm gonna let the counselor answer that question.
Yeah.
Okay. It was something that you said, Lisa, I wanted to comment on. You said responsibility. And I think we underestimate the responsibility that goes into a marriage. The same thing as, for example, I'm going to use an example of a house. So we look down upon an apartment. But if an apartment is something you can maintain and has less responsibility, as long as you are okay with it, then why are you looked down upon for having an apartment as opposed to a house? Because the house has more responsibilities. Just wanted to throw that out there. To answer his question, what do you think should be? What do you think must be learned before you marry? I think you should know who you are before you get married. And I think that takes time for self-exploration to understand what are my flaws and to look myself in the mirror and be confident in who I am. Because if I'm not confident in who I am, then how can I market and be a whole person to someone else if I don't have a clue of who I am? Which means I'm going to be trying to find out during the marriage.
Yeah. I think you hit it dead on. I think 2 things that I would say, Thomas, is the book 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman was extremely important to read for me because it helped me identify when Tobias is talking about learning about yourself. It helps you identify the ways you want to be loved. So then when you're in relationship, you understand how to express that to your partner. I think if anyone can learn, the best skill would be communication skills. You have to learn how to communicate and handle conflict outside of being in a marital relationship. Start going and having some skill development in that area. How do I communicate? Are my perceptions, do they align with what I'm saying? You know, when I'm communicating, are people's perceptions different? And have conversations even with your homegirls or your homeboys about, hey, how am I communicating? I think that's an important skill to bring into a marriage.
I agree with both of
y'all. Quiet.
I'm listening because you like giving us the truth. I told you we learn from each other and we learn from the audience. So I second all of that. I also think in going back to adding value and knowing yourself. So a large part of the work that I am doing and want to do in my practice is kind of building the person as they go along in life, like adding value, whatever that is, to be able to self-sustain yourself. Like, I truly believe the reason why I may not have all the problems that I've had that other people have is because I was a whole person, not without faults, but I was a whole person when I came into this marriage. I had gone to college, I had a job, I knew what it was to live on my own, I built my career. So then when I went and got married, then my husband and I could start to build our life together. We made sure certain things were in place. We learned each other and what was important to each other. And so I totally agree. It's understanding how your spouse communicates and who you are as a person. Like, those are probably the most key elements. Because I think if you can talk and you know who you are, then you are authentic in the relationship. And then when things aren't working for you and you know how to fight fairly and resolve conflict, you can kind of communicate and resolve it. Like, I agree. Those are the two two bedrocks of a marriage, is those two things. Yeah. Anything else you can kind of work out. I mean, beyond some of the major stuff, there's a couple big no-nos for me, but everything else I think can be worked out.
Well, I mean, like, can you believe that we are an hour in? And so, like, oh my God, I don't want to quit the conversation, but we're coming back next week, everyone. Next week, we're going to get into really the grit. That's stage 3, talking about rebellion and power struggles. Rebellion and power struggles, and discovery, reconciliation, and beginning again. And our special guest, Tobias Towers, we might be seeing him a while. He's going to be coming back to finish us out with this conversation. But Lisa, why don't you go over, like, what are our 3 takeaways that we're going to leave people with, and any other thoughts you have, Tobias, before we get off of this conversation?
No, looking forward to the conversation next week. Great show. Thank you all for having me.
Well, thank you so much. Before Lisa ends us off, please make sure that you share the video. Like, we are helpers one to another. Make sure you get us on the replay. For those who are joining us on the replay, thank you so much. We are going strong in our 2nd episode, and we are excited about bringing you great content and great conversation. So go take it away, Lisa.
So we hope that everyone enjoyed the show. You go tell your mama and them about the show. Speaking of mamas, my mama was on here. Thank you for supporting your girl. I saw you, mama. So the 3 top things, because we always want to make sure you walk away with something, right? We don't want our work to be in vain. So the 3 things: love is a verb, and falling in love is an emotion. Unrealistic expectations often lead to failure. And what's the last one, y'all? There's no blueprint for marriage. Yes. So we grow into the roles and the vows that we say before God and our friends. And it takes years, y'all, for 2 to become 1. So we want to thank everyone for joining. We are super excited of all the people that dropped in. I mean, all the love is magnificent. So thank you, and we'll be back next week. Peace.
All right, everybody. Take care.